Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's Maz back again today with another video for you guys. Today we're going into part 2 of the hard body work that we're doing. Say that 3 times fast. I'm sure that's probably pretty hard. So we're doing the body work on this hard body. And in the first part, I showed you where we filled the holes in the fender with CA glue. We also made a mechanical bond between the 2 molded halves of the body. And with that, we also got a nice little bead of excess on top that we could sand and get a preliminary body work done to. So you can still see this seam, but only because the CA glue's clear. There's really not a seam there anymore. I've got it nice and sanded smooth, even around the ribs in the roof. You know, ribbed for her pleasure. But that's only for my first part of body work. The second part is going to come in. We're going to do some Mr. White putty. I've already used that on the back, and just over a couple days you can see it actually sunk down because it actually shrinks as it cures. So that was flush when I first sanded it, but even over it curing completely, it's got little dimples there. So it's a very fine dimple. So I'm going to show you what we do to fill that in. The Mr. White putty is nice because you can use it straight out of the tube, and it's got a nice consistency out of the tube. It's not too thick. It's not like the Bondo you get from Walmart or anything. You can see how liquefied it is. But there's also a way, since it's lacquer based, you can also thin this down and make it even thinner, which makes it easier to work with at times and spread and all that stuff. So I have some just Walmart clean strip lacquer thinner here. We'll get it opened up. Get that guy opened up there. We also have just your average medicine cup. I took a popsicle stick and broke it in half. And we can take some of this Mr. Hobby putty. We can put just a little bit, and I'm going to do this off camera and then I'll show you. I'm not trying to do a bunch right off the gate. So that should be about enough. And put this lid on this guy. Get it out of the way so you're not making a mess. So we got just a little bit of putty in there. This stuff smells great. I mean, just put your nose in it. It smells amazing. No, that is not true. This is lacquer based, so it smells like lacquer. So then you can also take a little bit of your paint thinner, and we're going to start with just a little bit. So we got a little bit in there. We're going to take our stick, and you're going to start seeing it break down. And you're going to want to get this mixed up really well. And we might have to add a little putty, or we may have to add, we got this pretty thin, so this is going to be good for our first layer. It's what I like to do. So as you can see, that stuff's really thin. We're going to actually put a little bit of body filler back in that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get this mixed up to consistency, and I'll be right back with you guys. So the putty is now mixed at the right consistency with the lacquer. As you can see, it's pretty watery. It's not really watery. It's more a little bit thicker than milk. And what this does very well is you take your favorite your favorite brush, and you're going to take it and get that in there. Then we're going to just dab that right on top. And I don't mind if there's some excess. I kind of want it to be excess so that when it shrinks up, that hole is filled completely in the body, that divot. So you can see I went pretty generous with that one. We'll do the same thing over here. But with that being very thin, it also levels out pretty good. Doesn't give you like a crazy amount of filler to get rid of. So then we'll even take it, we'll just lightly, and you want to kind of take the excess towards where you want it, away from where you don't want it. We're going to go across this whole seam here. We're just going straight across it. We may need a little more filler by the time we're done because this is going to shrink up some. And we're not trying to be perfect here. We're just trying to get it on there before it cures up. You do have a little bit of time to work with this. So, like I said, get it where you want it. You can even take the brush and kind of use it to move it into that seam. And this stuff sands out very nice. This is very easy to sand. Put a little excess on those ribs for her pleasure. And come back down. Like I said, we're not being pretty here. We're just getting it on there before it cures up. It's okay if it's textured or whatever you want to do. And you can see how it kind of just flows. It doesn't just sit still until it gets to where it wants to be. So it kind of does its own thing to a certain extent, but you can control it. So we'll get that over that seam. We're about there. A little bit more just down to this drip rail, and we'll body work that drip rail as well. Like I said, you don't want it to puddle up right there, so kind of get your brush cleaned off and go back to it. We'll wipe it lightly. Put just a touch more. Want to make sure that seam disappears. And this will not be our last step. So this is just one step in the many of how I do body work on these things. And I really don't have much experience on a hard body of RC crawler, but I have experience from the model car world. So I'm just trying to get this build up on here so that we have something to work with when we do go to sand. And on the next application, after we sand, we may not thin it down. We may leave it a little more straight out of the bottle consistency. But on this one, I just wanted to show you there's different ways to go about it. I'm just trying to use up this putty at this point. Waste not, want not, you know, that type of deal. And also, the cool thing about it is that if you get it where you don't want it, you can simply reverse the curing phase by getting you some lacquer thinner on your brush and going back and touching it where you want it, where you want to remove it, and it'll break that putty back down into a liquid. So it's not pretty. That's not what we're looking for. We're just looking to get coverage. We're just wanting to get coverage. And I can already see it starting to cure on us as is now. So I'm gonna let this dry up. I got a few more places I need to apply it. I hope y'all could see it. I couldn't see what I was doing on camera, but I'm gonna get some other stuff applied, let it cure, and then I'll come back and show you. So the putty is now applied everywhere I want it. We got it on all the bolt holes that were removed on both sides. There were some body lines that I messed up right here, so I added a bunch of extra right there. I'll sand it out. We'll get the body lines back. Looks like a cake decorator on top. Those holes are filled, and these holes are high. Not like me, but got it on the back too. I just kind of use my finger and mush it around and texture it on certain spots that I know I don't need a bunch, like on the front. So I like to let this stuff cure for a few hours, make sure that it's good and hard before, that's what she said, before we go to start sanding. If you got a ton on there, you may want to sand, you know, an hour into it, get a little bit of that off quicker, and then let the rest of it cure. But I would suggest letting it cure pretty well before you start sanding it. That way you're actually getting dust coming off and not like partially liquefied filler. This up top dried. This is still wet down on the bottom. This dried in the time that it took for me to put this on, but it's because we added all that lacquer thinner to the body filler, the white putty. So we added all that lacquer thinner, which in turn, that stuff evaporating cures that and makes it a lot faster cure time. So this is probably close to being ready to be sanded. It's hard already. That's what she said. You know, between solder videos and bodywork videos, there's going to be a lot of that's what she said going on. So once this all gets cured up, I'll go back and sand it, and then I'll bring it back to y'all and show y'all where we're at. So we sanded the bodywork that I put on in the last part. You can see here, we got just a little bit we need to fill in here, but I stopped here because in the next video of bodywork, I'm going to show y'all the next step of how I go through. Instead of using this putty, there's a even simpler way to finish that bodywork. It's very easy to sand, but I told y'all I put a little extra here. We got our body line back. You can see this roll. We got that roll back there and on the back corners and on the other side. There's a little pinhole here. A little pinhole up top. But not to worry. We also, as you can see, sorry for the shadow, guys. There's very little filler in the roof. We still got to get a little bit off there, but you can still see that line only because the CA glue's there and the filler's more farther forward because of that dip, the way the molds fit together. So in the next step, we'll go through how to, this will be a whole nother video, but we will show you the next parts of filler primer. So at this point, with just a little pinhole and just a little bit of recess on this isn't even really recessed. You just see it because of how the CA glue was had a little bit of a dip in it. So this is actually smooth to the hand. And that's something else I want to tell y'all. Your eyes, you don't do body work with your eyes. You do body work with your hands. Best thing to do when you're trying to see if you got, like in this, on camera, this body line looks more pronounced here because your eye's not tricking you where the body filler is right here. So when I rub it and fill it, or if you were to put this in a solid color, you'll see where that roll, I recreated that body line where I took it out by accident. But like I said, your eyes cannot see that. You have to physically, like I always close my eyes when I'm rubbing over that. That's what she said. But your hands are your friends. So it'll tell you, and this you can even tell, we had a little more, there was an even bigger dip in this roof where the two molds were. Now we just got a slight little dip that's farther forward. Like I said, I'm not chasing that. There's certain times in body work that you have to pick and choose your battles. Color has one big thing to do with it. If we were painting this black, yeah, I'd get this roof completely flat. You would see every ripple in it from every angle. But in white, you will never see that ripple. And plus, it's an off-road body. It's going to get beat up. It's going to add character to it. So I'm not trying to get a, Pebble Beach, body quality out of this. So all I'm trying to do is make it more presentable than what it was, just leaving a crack there and painting it and watching the paint crack across. Like I said, there's very little filler on the back. You can see it's just barely any filler around those holes. And as I said, I like to bury that CA glue, and as long as you have primer to bury that CA glue, and the CA glue may not cause any issue for you after it cures for a long time, but I still like to bury it under something because paint does not agree with it. Also, sometimes you can lose your door lines when you're sanding, and if I had another piece of sandpaper here, let me grab a piece of sandpaper real quick. Something as simple as taking a piece of sandpaper, folded over, and not this type, this is 180, more of like a 220 or a 320 or a 400, something like this, fold it over, because the lower the grit, the more crisp of a fold you'll get. And you can actually go back in these body lines, where on like a model car, we use the back edge of a X-Acto knife, but on this body, that crease fits perfectly in this. And you can redefine, and you may even want to go over them anyway, because once you put primer on this, it's going to fill those lines just a little bit, but you can go back and recreate those, and that crease in that paper gives you a perfect flat edge to get them back in there. So very easy way to do it. I mentioned earlier in this video, and I know this video is getting a little long, but I mentioned earlier that I had 400, 800, and 1000 grit. On this part of the bodywork, I mainly used 180 to get the rough profile, and then 320 to finish sand, which that's what this is. 320, we don't really need to go anymore, because our next step is going to be filler primer. Don't miss that video, because a lot of times when people do filler primer, they'll spray the whole body. I don't like to use filler primer like that. I like to use it as filler. So I'll stripe this body across this line and feather it out on both sides. And I'll hit the bottom area, anywhere where I have body filler, I'll hit, just dust those areas. I do not use filler primer or high build primer, however you want to call it. I do not spray that over the whole body, because just like we were talking about those lines disappearing, filler primer will fill those up if you spray it too heavy. Also, watch out for that video, because I'll show you the correct way to use filler primer. If it's your first time, you'll want to put it on way too heavy, I promise you. So, like always, guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in to part 2 of the bodywork tutorial on these hard bodies. Like I said, I have zero experience. This is my first hard body. The only experience I have comes from polystyrene models, which, like 1/24 models, I've done them, so a lot of them. So this is kind of the same thing. It's all body work at the end of the day, and all I'm doing is sharing what experience I have with 24 scale models that I used to do. And this, it has kind of, you know, waterfalled over into this hard body for this RC crawler. So like always, guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Like and subscribe to the channel, turn that notification bell on, tell me a joke down below in the comments, and until next time, guys, y'all have a good one.